Ahoy hoy! Welcome back to my channel. Since it's about 10 days left to Halloween, I'll continue my spooky October series for the month of October. Today, I figured I'd review Hocus Pocus 2. So, I was about 11 when the original came out in 1993. In fact, I'm the same age as Thora Birch. Actually, I'm only like 2-3 days older than she is. But she plays, I think, 9 years old in their first movie. Now, there was a lot of people, especially the original fans, who were worried about, oh, I'm not like this because, Thora Birch, Vanessa Shaw, and I can't pronounce the actor's name that plays Max, but they weren't going to return to the film. And neither was the guy who played Thackeray Banks, because, his storyline basically came to an end in the first movie, but then people were like, could argue that it was the same thing for the witches. So I won't give out too much. I'm going to try really hard not to give out any spoilers, other than already that the characters Max, Allison, and Danny are not in this movie. So this takes place 29 years later, after the first movie. And it does open with a scene of showing the girls, like the Sanderson sisters, when they were kids. Although, I think Winnie is supposed to be 16, while the other two are younger. Sarah is obviously the youngest one, and Mary is the middle child. And, they're not living with their parents, which makes people wonder what happened to their parents. My guess is that probably, unfortunately, both parents were probably dead at that point. And considering the pastor, or priest, of Salem wanted Winnie to marry at 16, that shows you that he thought that she was old enough to get married and, whatnot. Because back then, people grew up really fast. Like, not in the sense of, physically growing up, but, more was expected of you from an earlier age compared to nowadays. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind when you watch a movie like Hocus Pocus, but you do deal with some aspects of history and stuff. And the opening sequence takes place like in 1653, so if I did the math right, which I can't assure you guys, it's about 40 years before the opening scene in the first movie. So yeah, so they were probably in their 50s when they were hanged in the first movie. So I know a lot of people are not going to like this movie because it doesn't exactly follow the first movie, but I think on its own, I think it'll do good, especially with the new generations. Because I don't really think you have to see the first movie in order to get this movie. I mean, it's not like Ghostbusters Afterlife, where you do need to know the first two movies to know how to really understand how the Afterlife movie is. And I don't really think Hocus Pocus is like that, because they do kind of explain some stuff in this movie that did happen in the first movie. But I don't think you really need to see the first movie that much to really understand what happens in the second movie, because the plot is so much different. Their motives are much different in this movie compared to the first movie. And there's kind of a sense of, they're evil definitely when they come back to life again. But it seems more of a vendetta this time versus last time. And also, their vendetta is not what you expect in this movie. I think if they came back with a vendetta that they wanted a revenge on Max, Allison, and Danny, that would be one thing. But their vendetta was strictly over being pissed off at Salem in itself. Which, yeah, you kind of get... Sorry, y'all, I'm a little bit distracted. It's kind of like what you get with the first movie in itself, but, it's completely different. In the first movie, Winnie was more focused on, making sure they get children to feed off their energy so they can live longer and stuff. Especially the night they came back, because they had to get a child's life before sunrise, otherwise they would die. Which, if you've seen the first movie, you get what I'm saying. I'm trying hard not to spoil anything for people who haven't seen the first movie yet. And this time, it's different. They're still focused on the fact. I mean, it's still like they're still back for one night, but their aim isn't to collect the souls of children so they can live until the next day. It's more like, you know what? I want more power. Therefore, if we get more power, we can probably make it next day, regardless how many lives of children we get. That kind of mentality. So the mood of it was definitely different this time. And their hatred was different this time around than it was in the first movie. I would say I'm always kind of wondering why they didn't have this hatred towards the pastor or the priest that exiled them from Salem initially, which is what you see, which would explain why they would hate Salem. But like, I don't know why that wasn't off the bat. But I kind of get why the direction in the first movie went the way it did. And then this is more of an afterthought. Like, you know what? Rather than focus on getting kids, let's just get the power spell. And then we'll have a revenge on Salem and the pastor's descendants. So, yes. But towards the end of the movie, and I won't say what happens or anything like that, but it kind of makes you see like a human side of the witches. I mean, obviously in the open scene, you could tell that the witches were not inherently evil. They, especially when he just did something that the pastor wasn't happy about. Which, given hindsight, I think it was ridiculous for him to get mad at her over that. But considering I don't think the parents were not in the picture at that point, I think he was thinking, when he marries, she could at least have someone to help take care of her younger sisters. That could have been the thought process. But back then, you had to get married. Winnie's attitude in this movie about marriage was kind of similar to like Melda, or what was her name? Melda or Magna or Milda, whoever the princess was in Brave. Her attitude was reflecting of that. Although, I think in Brave, it was more of a temporary thing. She didn't want to get married at that moment versus Winnie, where she says, I don't want to get married at all. Even though she has a crush on Billy, who, as you all know, was killed in the first movie, or like at least you found out she killed him in the first movie. And he makes a return in this movie, which is great. And it's a lot different than how his character was in the first film. It was actually he was actually a little bit more funnier, in my opinion, than the first movie. But you learn a lot of things that make sense in a way. I will leave it at that regarding that thread of the movie. But yeah, just like by the end of the movie, unless you're someone who's absolutely against witchcraft for whatever reason, you start to see a side of the Sanderson sisters you weren't expecting. Unless, you could understand why they became the way they did. Just from the opening scene from the second movie. And you can definitely see some Wiccan and modern day witchcraft, neo-paganism in this movie. Like, the two girls that accidentally made the witches come back to life. They would either be classified as Wiccan or they'd be classified as witches. Now, there are some pagans who do spell work, but just because you do spell work as pagan does not mean you're a Wiccan or you're a witch. What this person said one time when I was doing a lot of research on this? She said, not all Wiccans are pagans or neo-pagans. Wiccan's more like neo-pagan than pagan, but pagan is a very umbrella term for any nature-based religion. Um, so Wiccan and Druids tend to use a lot of spell work. And in Druidism, at least, you need a coven, and you need to join a coven in order to practice it, because their magic, I think, is more extreme. Not like in a dark sense, but like you need other people to be around in order to do it. It's not solitary. You can be a Wiccan and be solitary, but you can't be a Druid and be solitary. Let's see. So yeah, not all pagans are witches. Um, it can be very confusing. Not all pagans are witches. They don't always do spell work, so although some pagans can. Um, and Wiccans are, as I said, under the umbrella term of being pagan, or more specifically, neo-pagan. But you see a few things in that you see in the movie that weren't there last time. Because I think in the last 29 years, paganism has become a little bit more popular again, in the sense that people are open to practicing it. Same thing with Wicca and Druids. They're a little bit open to it, but they're still a little bit more secret with their craft compared to Wicca. Um, for example, I identify as pagan, but I don't necessarily am pagan 100%. I consider myself to be a pagan-leaning Unitarian Universalist, which is a mouthful. But just know I have some pagan beliefs. Like, for example, on October 31st, other than Halloween, it is Samhain. Spelled, what does that say? It's overheating. Why is it overheating like that? Um, Samhain, which is actually spelled Samhain, it's called Samhain then because it's a Gaelic word. Samhain was basically the end of the harvest, and it was a Gaelic festival celebrating the end of the harvest. And back then, because there was paganism in Ireland initially, it's called Celtic paganism, and you can still practice it if you want to, and that's considered to be neo-paganism too. Um, they believe that the veil between the living and the dead was more thin on Halloween night, so that's why you see some traditions on Halloween to this day that transcended from Samhain. So you see like houses being decorated, you see people dressing up, and their thinking back then was you didn't want to invite any evil spirits into your house, so that's why you dressed it up and stuff. And but at the same time, you would honor those in your family and your friends that had passed away too, because you honor them and stuff. So it's almost like the Mexican version of Day of the Dead, except it's on the 31st of October. So having said that, so like the two girls who they're witches or Wicca, probably more like Wicca. Although I don't know if that would go as far as saying Wicca, because they didn't exactly say what they were, but they practice witchcraft or do spell work at least. They mentioned let me put my glasses on because it's hard for me to read. Okay. So they mentioned the blah, blah, blah. There we are. The maiden, the mother, and the crone. All right. This is referred to a triple goddess in neo-paganism. It basically represents 3 stages of life, basically. And it could also represent phases of the moon as well. So triple goddess is basically the goddess of the moon, the earth, and childbirth. And symbols are crescent, full and dark moon, original crescent, half and full moon, late antiquity, waxing, full and waning moons. And the original triple goddess is basically Hecate, which witches tended to worship, not Satan. Because the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand is that Satan is not someone that's believed in paganism. While you do got some deities that could pass as Satan, like you have Hades and Pluto with Roman and Greek, ancient Greek mythology. They tend to be more of gods of the underworld. They were basically gods of the dead, whether if the dead was good or bad. And they did have their own version of heaven and hell. I think the good part, especially in ancient Greece, if I'm not mistaken, were known as the Elysian Fields, and I forgot what the bad part was called. But yeah, they had their version of heaven and hell back then. But Pluto and Hades would control the whole entire thing, not just one part, and someone else controls the other part. And then, like in Norse mythology, you had someone called Loki. But Loki's more like a mischievous deity versus a deity that's sinister. And the thing is, in paganism, if you do anything bad, they don't really believe that, or basically you can't get away with saying, this God made me do it. No. So, like, basically, when you join a Wiccan coven, or a Druid coven, or just start doing spell work or whatnot, or even as major tenets in paganism, there's something that's always warned to you, which is basically the law of three, or the threefold law, or law of return, but I'll get to that later. So yeah, Hecate was basically the original triple goddess. And so some people actually thought that Persephone, which you actually do see in ancient Greece, was actually maybe the third and lowest aspect of the goddess Hecate. And there's also other goddesses that were considered to be triple goddesses too, like Artemis or Diana too. So yeah, and I think the Morgana in Celtic paganism is considered to be a triple goddess as well, although it doesn't mention it on here, so let me just double check. The Morgan. It didn't see triple goddess, I don't think. It is made up of three goddesses, so that's the difference between triple goddess and what the Morrigan is. The triple goddesses is basically one being that has three representations. Basically, think of if you're a Christian, like say Protestantism, I think is the best one to describe it. You believe in the Holy Trinity, so you believe that God is also God, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. Well, that's what the triple goddess is. The maiden, the mother, and the crone all represent the triple goddess. It is one person. And Hecate is the original triple goddess, even though it's evolved over years. But what I was about to say with the Morrigan that I thought was a triple goddess is that it's basically a trio of individuals, all sisters, called the Three Morgana, which is, I'm probably going to fuck up these names. I apologize in advance, but the first one is spelled B-A-D-B. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. I know how to pronounce the second one, Maka. And then the third is Neman, I think. It was spelled N-E-M-A-I-N. So, yeah. Okay, so that's good. I know now that the Morgan is not technically a triple goddess, because it's made up of three goddesses rather than just one with three identities. Okay, so yeah, to explain the maiden, the mother, and the crone, just in case people didn't get what that meant watching Hocus Pocus 2. Now, another thing that you see from Wicca or from neo-paganism or witchcraft that you see in this film that's so greatly demonstrated is the one thing that's always warned, like I said earlier, the law of triple three, or the law of three, the law of return, or the threefold law. So, one could say this is karma, but this is more than just karma. It's a religious tenet held by some Wiccans, neo-pagans, and occultists. it states that whatever energy a person puts out into the world, be it positive or negative, will return to that person 3 times. And you see this at the end of the movie. Actually, technically, you saw it at the beginning of the first movie, and even towards the end of the last movie. But you see it more in hindsight at the end of this movie. And it especially gets to you because, if you're a Wiccan, if you are Druid, or you're another type of neo-pagan, or you just do witchcraft or whatnot, or you do spell work as a pagan, you know that was a major. That's what's warned when you join a coven in Wicca or in Druid, or you just have a witch coven. That is always warned to you, because whatever you do may come back at you threefold. And I definitely like this movie. I know some people who were the original fans of the first movie were not quite thrilled at this movie, but I liked it for what it was. Oh fuck! This is about to start. Don't. Sorry, I got YouTube up here. I just don't want the video to start, because then I don't want to have to cut out the sound. I'll just mute my computer now so I don't have to worry about it, just in case. So yeah, I like the movie. Yeah, it may not have been the same as the original, but I liked it. I think it can flourish on its own, even if you haven't seen the first. There's definitely, Wiccan and neo-pagan and elements in it that make sense if you know what they mean. Also, I know some people were having issues about the book being given to Winnie by the devil, because you'll see in the opening scene who they really get the book from. And as I said, there's elements of witchcraft that are, keep in mind, pagan-based or neo-pagan-based. And like I said, Satan does not exist in paganism or neo-paganism. What was that sound? But I mean, yes, I think some people could enter witchcraft and claim Satan is the one they're doing witchcraft for. But at its whole, at its base, that's not the case. Because you gotta remember, paganism is older than Christianity and the beliefs in Christianity. It goes back beyond 2,000 years. And why you had some deities that were mischievous or whatnot, that Loki was. Most people didn't really think it was a deity of cynicism that was causing all these issues. But that's just my opinion of it, really, when it comes down to it. But the problem, though, is that it does kind of conflict with a scene from the first movie where, this guy was dressed up like Satan, and the sisters were happy to see him, and seemed to be fans of hell. So that does kind of conflict with that tidbit from the second movie. I will say that now. But yeah. I mean, honestly, I think, in my opinion, I do like the direction it goes from the book being given to them by the person that obviously wasn't it from the first movie. And, their distaste for Salem makes sense, especially if you watch the opening scene from the second movie. And, I think that's their way of getting revenge from what you see in the first movie with feeding the lies off of children. Other than, trying to stay young forever and stuff. I mean, you see elements of that in other parts of the world and stuff. Like Elizabeth Bathory from Hungary. I think it was Hungary. It wasn't from Hungary, right? Yeah. So you even see that in people who don't describe themselves as witches and stuff. So, yeah. I mean, like I said, I personally liked it. I don't think you have to see the first movie in order to see this movie. If you don't like it, that's fine. If you want to, you can tell me why you don't like it. You can also tell me why you do like it. You can tell me which parts you wish were in there, were not in there. You know, I rarely give movie reviews, but I felt like since this is October and it's spooky season, I figured I'd let you guys know I've seen the movie and give my review of it. And it's 2 thumbs up. So, yeah. If you like this video, smash the like button. That hurt. If you subscribe, I'll be absolutely delighted, and I'll see you guys later. Toodles!